important to draw a distinction between the Taliban and al-Qaeda. The Taliban has resorted to terror tactics, but those terror tactics have principally been focused on Afghanistan.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that the Taliban engages in, quote, tactics akin to terrorism, but you don't actually consider them a terrorist group.
They have a different classification. They have a classification that does allow us to pursue financial sanctions against them that have succeeded in limiting their capability, that have been effective.
With Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth, welcome to the Friday edition of America's Forum. If it weren't so serious, Miranda, I'd call it the White House version of the name game. All this confusion.
Definitions. It's very complex.
And it gets to be a lot of sophisticated nonsense, sadly. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest doubling down on previous claims made by his assistant that the Taliban's not a terrorist organization. This, as that same organization, the Taliban, claimed responsibility for killing 3 U.S. contractors at the Kabul airport in Afghanistan. Joining us now, Ali Safavi, president of the Near East Policy Research Council and U.S. spokesman for the National Council of Resistance for Iran. Ali, it is so good to have you back on America's Forum. I'm interested in your perspective. This is more than just wordplay. This is more than just a name game. What do you sense from the White House and its steadfast refusal to label the Taliban what it is?
Well, first of all, JD, good morning, and it's very nice to be back on your show. Well, I think that if you look at the statute, the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, based upon which groups are designated as terrorists, there are 3 criteria of a group being designated by the U.S. government as terrorists. 1 is to be foreign, 2, to engage in terrorism or terrorist activity, and 3, have the capability and intent to carry out terrorism or acts of terrorism, and that terrorism has to threaten the national security of the United States. There's no question, at least, that in the past, and perhaps even now, the Iranian regime has been providing weaponry, IEDs to the Taliban and to al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And as you know, there have been many American casualties as a result of these roadside bombs. So clearly, at least if we speak the statutory language, the Taliban would qualify as a terrorist organization.
Ali, this isn't the first time we've heard the Obama White House reluctant to label the Taliban for what some are saying is a terrorist organization. Take a listen to former Press Secretary Jay Carney.
Does the U.S. still regard the Taliban as a terrorist group?
We regard the Taliban as an enemy combatant in a conflict that has been going on in which the United States has been involved for more than a decade. And in this case, although, as you know, we dealt with the Qataris in order to secure his release, it was absolutely the right thing to do.
And that's what he said in June of 2014. So, Ali, in your opinion, are these verbal gymnastics more than embarrassing, or can they also be perceived as dangerous?
Well, to be honest, I don't know what motivates the White House's spokesman, but clearly, as I said, if one wants to go by the statute, there's no question that Taliban, al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah, and other similar groups in the region, of course, Islamic State, are terrorist groups. There's no question about it.
And you know, Ali, that proves why you're a great representative for Iran's parliament in exile, because you're looking at statutory language. But there's another perception in a minute and a half that remains in this segment. According to CNN and other reports, one of the 5 Taliban leaders traded for the release of Sergeant Bowe Bergdahl has apparently contacted some of his old pals involved in terrorism. With the minute that remains, what are the implications of this report?
Well, I think, as they say, once a terrorist, always a terrorist. Clearly, perhaps this individual is reaching out to his old cohorts and trying to join them and carry on with what he did that got him into Gitmo in the first place. So I think, quite frankly, that when you talk about terrorist groups, and in fact terrorists sponsoring the states, the policy has to be one of firmness, the policy has to be one of decisiveness and not giving into concessions and not trying to play ball or accommodating these groups or governments in the states that support them. And clearly that speaks to the Iranian regime as well, which, as I'm sure you know, and as the State Department itself has over the years said repeatedly, is the main state sponsor of terror in the world today.
And
so
mindful of
their
that
support
fact,
for-
Ali, we are going to come back and talk with you more about Iran, the stakes for what is happening there, not only their state sponsorship of terrorism, but their effort to finally gain nuclear weapons. More with Ali Safavi as America.
If there's an agreement that strictly limits the amount of enrichment that's going on, then they can't make a bomb. And if they do not accept that agreement, if we have solid evidence, which we don't have at the moment we don't think they're actually trying to produce a bomb. But I don't think any US president can accept a nuclear-armed Iran. I simply think that the Iranians are prudent and smart and clever enough not to take that final step.
Roger Cohen of the New York Times, actually, I think the Iranians would be clever enough to go ahead and take that final step. At any rate, we're discussing
You're not alone.
If Iran would end up with a nuclear bomb as these negotiations continue and continue. With Miranda Khan, J.D. Hayworth, back on America's Forum. Miranda, the president is still working to finish these negotiations. They keep moving the deadline, and according to other reports, Iran is still moving forward with its plans.
Yeah, the White House officials testified before the Senate Banking Committee that Iran is tinkering with advanced technologies to enrich uranium, which is raising concerns about the president's capabilities of actually reaching a deal with Iran.
Let us continue the conversation with Ali Safavi, the president of the Near East Policy Research Group and U.S. spokesman for the National Council of Resistance of Iran. So, Ali, what is going on with the Iranian regime? Is it too strong to say the administration seeks to mollify those in government in Tehran?
Well, unquestionably, the Iranian regime has continued its nuclear weapons program despite more than a year of negotiations. For one thing, the research and development is continuing. The weaponization program is continuing. Iran is not allowing the IAEA access to some of the key military sites, including Parchin, where high explosive tests have been carried out. And of course, as the IAEA Director General said recently, the Iranian regime has not responded to several very critical, outstanding questions about Iran's possible military aspects of Iran's nuclear weapons program. So if the Iranian regime was really interested in abandoning its nuclear weapons program, you wouldn't need all this back and forth discussions in Geneva, in other capitals of the world. The Iranians could allow IAEA inspectors and international monitors to go to Iran, pack up their nuclear weapons stuff, material, and ship them to some third country. So clearly, the Iranian regime is pursuing a nuclear weapons program, and despite the concessions that they have received, the largesse that they have received, which will be to the tune of $12 billion by March, has not at all persuaded them that they should let go of their nuclear weapons program. That's very, very clear, and in many respects, as Javad Zarif said, that no part of Iranian nuclear weapons program will be dismantled and no program will be stopped. And quite frankly, even the joint plan of action that is talked about so much does not address many of these critical issues.
So if what you're saying is true, why would the president still try to work with Iran?
Well, of course, that's a very, very good question. Obviously, as I'm sure you know and you reported earlier this morning, there is bipartisan consensus in U.S. Congress that everything must be done to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. The Kirk-Menendez sanctions in the waiting bill was approved by a resounding 18-4 vote, including 6 of the 10 Democrats sitting on that committee. I guess perhaps one can say that perhaps those advising the president have this vision that if you're nice to the mullahs, if you accommodate them, that they will be nice to the U.S. and to the international community, which of course, at least from our perspective, our 30-some years of experience with this regime, I think it's a very misguided perception. The Iranian regime has proven that it will take any, if you will, gesture of goodwill as a sign of weakness.
Well, let me pick up on that. Let me pick up on that, Ali, and a gesture of goodwill, bipartisan goodwill toward Iranians in exile like you. You mentioned Robert Menendez. Did you and other members of your group take heart when he confronted the State Department officials that testified in front of his committee, saying that he thought they were, quote, reading talking points from Tehran? 30 seconds to answer that, sir.
Well, of course, there's enormous support for congressional action among the Iranian diaspora in the United States, and they're a very, very active diaspora. From my understanding, the leading organization that represents the Iranian American, the United States, the Organization of Iranian American Communities, issued a statement commending Senator Menendez and other senators on that committee for basically calling for firm action and decisive action regarding Iran's nuclear weapons program. Remember that the Iranian regime has been using these concessions, that the money that they have received from
and we will keep that in mind. Again, my friend, our time runs short. Ali Safavi, thank you for your time. Next, it's J.D. Gordon.